This is the incredible story of survival of the fittest. On October 13, 1972, 45 people boarded a Chilean Air Force aircraft for what should have been a routine flight from Santiago to the small town of Calamay. The chartered flight was organized by an amateur rugby team who were going to play a friendly match in the small town. However, due to bad weather, the pilot decided to make a stopover in the middle of the journey. They would rest for a few hours and then continue on to their destination. But fate had other plans. As they were about to take off again, the plane's engines failed. The crew tried their best to get the engines working again, but it was no use. They were forced to make an emergency landing in a remote area of the Andes Mountains. When the dust settled, they realized that of the 45 people on board, only 33 had survived the crash. The survivors quickly realized that they were in a nightmare scenario. They were at an altitude of 12,000 feet with temperatures as low as 14 degrees Fahrenheit. There was no sign of life around them, and the nearest town was more than 60 miles away. The crash had taken place in a secluded valley surrounded by icy mountains, making rescue virtually impossible. To make matters worse, many of the survivors had suffered serious injuries, and the food and medical supplies in the plane were limited. As the days went by, the survivors had to make agonizing decisions. With food and water running low, they had to ration their supplies and choose who would get more and who would get less. The injured were in a particularly difficult situation. As the medical supplies dwindled, they had to treat each other's wounds with whatever they could find in the wreckage, all while battling the freezing cold and the emotional toll of their situation. But even in the face of such adversity, the human spirit prevailed. The survivors pulled together, sharing what little food and water they had and supporting each other emotionally. Some of them began to see miracles around them, like the condensation forming on the inside of the plane's hull, which they used to collect water. Others found strength in the most unexpected places, like the dog who refused to abandon his post despite being injured. After 72 days, a search plane flew over the Andes, spotted the wreckage, and sent a rescue party to the coordinates. Of the 33 survivors, only 32 were found alive. One of the men had died just hours before rescue arrived. The survivors were then taken to a nearby hospital where they were treated for hypothermia and malnutrition. The story of the survivors of the Andes is a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. In the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, they managed not only to survive, but to help each other and preserve their humanity. Their story continues to inspire people around the world and reminds us that no matter how difficult the situation may seem, there is always hope. Thank you for watching this episode. If you liked it, don't forget to share it with your friends. Until next time, 72 Days of Terror. The unbelievable story of the Andean survivors in the icy heights of the Andes Mountains. A miracle of survival was about to happen. On October 13, 1972, a chartered plane carrying 45 players, family members and friends, crashed into the snow-covered mountains. The impact was devastating. Many passengers died instantly, while others were seriously injured, trapped in the bitter cold of the mountains. However, against all odds, 16 people survived the initial crash. They found themselves isolated, surrounded by towering mountains, and with temperatures dropping to a staggering -30 degrees Celsius overnight. Without proper cold weather gear and with scarce supplies, the survivors faced a daily battle against hunger, extreme cold, and desperation. As the days passed, the situation worsened. Food supplies quickly ran out. The few chocolates and wines they had were consumed in the first few weeks. There was no sign of rescue. The news had already declared that everyone was dead. Hope was beginning to fade. It was then that, in one of the most difficult moments, the group had to make a desperate decision to survive. They resorted to the bodies of friends and family members who had died in the accident. This painful choice was made so that they could have some chance of survival in an environment that seemed to offer no way out. Despite facing an unimaginable emotional ordeal, the spirit of survival spoke louder. Two men, Fernando Parado and Roberto Canessa, decided that waiting was no longer an option. With extraordinary courage, they improvised equipment and set off on a nearly suicidal journey through the icy mountains in search of help. They walked for 10 days, climbing treacherous peaks, facing snowstorms and cutting winds. With every step, their bodies begged them to give up, but the will to save their companions kept them going. Finally, exhausted and on the verge of collapse, they met a goat herder in the mountains. This encounter was the first ray of hope after weeks of absolute terror. The herder immediately alerted the authorities, and a rescue team was mobilized. 2 days later, helicopters flew over the crash site, and one by one, the survivors were rescued. After 72 days of terror in the mountains, the incredible story of survival in the Andes was coming to an end. This story is not just about tragedy or suffering. It is a powerful lesson in courage, teamwork, and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit in the face of the greatest challenges.